Who was George Haigh? To the police he was known as the acid bath murderer. John Haigh was a dangerous man to know. If you were a friend of his, and rich, the chances were you ended up with a bullet in the back of your head, and your body dumped into a vat of sulfuric acid. His theory was if there was no body, then there was no crime, and he got away with it 5 times. His crimes fueled a life of luxury, living in an expensive London hotel, driving fast cars and having his suits made in Savile Row. To his friends and future victims he was a man of culture and taste, eager to treat you to afternoon tea or an evening drink in his hotel, and maybe take you up the road to a concert at the Royal Albert Hall, until he knew you well enough to talk about your finances, the properties you owned, and where he'd find your savings. He'd tell you about his strict Plymouth Brethren upbringing in Yorkshire, where his parents built a 7-foot fence around the house and wouldn't let him bring any school friends back in case he was contaminated by the outside world. He was always a little vague about how he made his money, and the explanation that he was a civil engineer and inventor seemed convincing enough. He even had a small workshop down in Crawley, where if he really liked you, he might take you to discuss business deals. But once the door was closed behind you, things became far from friendly. This was the fate of his 6th and last victim, a kindly and talented lady who was also a resident in the hotel, Mrs. Olive Durand Deacon. She was delighted to hear that nice Mr. Haigh, who sat on the table opposite her in the hotel, was an inventor. She had a scheme herself to produce and patent artificial fingernails. This was 1949, and the post-war period when women wanted a bit of glamour. Mr. Haigh liked the idea, and suggested she come down to the workshop to look at a few blueprints he'd knocked up for the project. That was the last they ever saw of her. When Mrs. Durand Deacon appeared to have vanished off the face of the earth, her friends and family were desperate. It was John Haigh who took her best friend to the police station to report the matter. But a lady police sergeant became suspicious of Haigh's jaunty manner, and investigations showed he'd sold off Mrs. Durand Deacon's jewelry in the last few days, and even had her fur coat cleaned. When they came to search through the rubble in the yard outside Haigh's workshop, an observant pathologist spotted what he recognized as a couple of human gallstones and then, more recognizable, a set of false teeth. This was all that was left of Mrs. Durand Deacon. Inside the workshop, police found a large metal drum, and beside it several containers of acid, a wartime revolver and gloves and an apron splattered with acid. Haigh confessed to the murder, and to 5 others over the years, always shooting his victims first, using the revolver he'd stolen from one of his victims, and then disposing of them in metal drums filled with acid. After a couple of days, the resulting sludge would be poured down a drain or out into the workshop yard. He said in the case of Mrs. Durand Deacon he'd even had time for a cup of tea and a fried egg on toast at the local cafe between shooting her and starting the acid bath treatment. Then Haigh made a further confession, as if what he'd already said wasn't bad enough. He said his main motive for the murders was his urge to drink his victims' blood. He'd cut a nick in their necks and filled a glass or 2 with their blood to quench his thirst. A knife was found in the glove pocket of the expensive Alvis car sitting outside his hotel. But was the vampire story just another ploy by the ever-confident Mr. Haigh to avoid the gallows and be sent to Broadmoor Hospital as a madman? This was the task of the jury to decide at his trial, and it only took them half an hour to reject the insanity plea and dispatch him to the condemned cell at Wandsworth Prison. John Haigh remains in the public eye in a special exhibition at the Museum of London, where a collection of grisly relics are open to public view from New Scotland Yard's infamous Black Museum. The gloves and apron Haigh used to protect himself from burns from the acid are on show, together with Mrs. Durand Deacon's gallstones and dentures and the revolver. He was sentenced to death and was hanged in Wandsworth Prison on the 10th of August 1949.